Yeah, Tripp Brockway, VP Global Sales at Paddle. It's going to be a very different kind of talk, so less focus on sales funnel, more focused on kind of broader trends and how to deal with the economy getting weird, which is really what we're going to focus on here. So let's keep this super conversational, by the way. So just like with Kyle, like jump in with questions, interrupt me at any point if you guys want to go deeper on one of the topics here. So you all are probably feeling this a little bit. Anyone feel like everything's going great, economy's great, nothing's changed? Yeah, cool. We're seeing the same thing. So we sit on data for about 40,000 SaaS companies. And so we have a little bit of a lens into this. And so we aggregate this in two ways. One is looking at B2C SaaS companies, so often a leading indicator as to how the economy is doing. And what we've seen here is that growth is very much flatlined in the past couple of months especially. And when you look at it from a B2B perspective, this trend also continues, mostly in the form of churn. So this chart's a little busy, but basically churn is up a whole 1.5 relative to 2.5 years ago. So things are harder. If you're feeling that, it's real, it's justified. So if you're a CEO and you're nervous, tell your board that, yeah, it's real, everyone's feeling it, etc. So obviously, the question from here is like, what do we do? Before I get too much into that, though, I want to make things a little worse for you. Things are just broadly hard, and they have been trending in that direction in general. So this is over the last 5 years. Average competitors in a given industry in SaaS is up 16x. CAC is way up. Obviously, people are demanding more money, and they're leaving faster. So things were already getting hard, and now they've just gotten a lot harder and worse. So say all this to say status quo probably isn't going to work. So you do need to think about how do we get ahead of this and start to make some changes so we're not surprised. So let's get into that a bit. Our view at Paddle, we're very opinionated about this, is the right thing to do here is to focus. And what I mean by that is on the things that your company is uniquely qualified to do to win. So that's your team, hiring great people, having an anti-fragile sales team, for instance, making sure they're well taken care of and know what they need to do to succeed, having a world-class product, and understanding your customer better than anyone else. We did a survey of these 30,000 SaaS companies, 40,000 SaaS companies that use our platform to ask them, why can't you do this? Like, what's in your way of actually focusing on the things you should do to win? By the way, we also asked, do you agree with this? And they all said yes, of course, or like 95%. And what we saw from folks is there's sort of like 6 big buckets of things that were causing them to be a bit distracted from those core competencies. One is customer acquisition. So like how do we grow? How do we acquire more customers? Pricing and packaging, expansion revenues, how do we upsell? All the operations around finance, billing, compliance, sales tax, all the boring stuff. And then of course, churn. And if you know our Patrick Campbell, he does a 25-minute talk where he only says churn for 25 straight minutes. So I suggest Googling that if you haven't seen it, because it's fun. There's a ton of stuff underneath this that we also uncovered. And we're actually going to get really tactical and talk about some of these things. Because while we do think that you should be focused, with almost all of your attention on your customer, your team, and your product, obviously these things are real and they're going to be hitting you in the face every day, and there's stuff that we can do to address some of them. So let's get into it. The first thing we recommend thinking about right now in this moment, given where the economy is going, is your positioning. So how are you talking to the market? Who are you talking to? And like tomorrow, our recommendation would be to go look at this. You should probably change what you're doing if you haven't already tomorrow. Specifically, a couple things to look at. What is your sales messaging? So to Kyle's point, how is your team actually going to market? What are the things they're saying to customers right now? If it's the same as it was 12 months ago, you've got a problem. Second point is, who are you targeting? As we talked about earlier, a really smart question around how we optimize the funnel. Thinking intelligently about focusing on who you're talking to right now. What we recommend is to really hone in there. So rather than trying to talk to everybody who's over 100 employees, blah, 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 looking at your data to understand where you win, how you win, and really focusing in on key core segments. So at Paddle, for instance, we were selling to every SaaS company. We've stopped doing that. We are selling to only a very small subsection of the market right now, and we're basically saying no to everybody else. We know our effort is better placed there. It's more likely to convert to revenue. We're literally turning people away right now and not doing any outbound outreach on companies that don't look exactly like the kind of companies we know are going to convert, are more likely to convert. Expansion revenue. So old adage, I think most of you probably know this one. It's easier to get an extra dollar from a customer you have than from a customer you don't. So what we see when we look at this across the 40,000 companies in our portfolio is that the highest performing ones, 20% of their revenue or more is from their existing customer base. Unfortunately, most, the vast majority, have zero or negative. So what do we do to fix that? The first thing is multi-product. So this is a little bit beyond sales and marketing, obviously. So for those of you who are VPs of sales, CMOs, go yell at your product team or your CEO about this. But one of the first things you can do is adding a different product or splitting your existing product out into multiple products. Companies that do this grow at 30 to 50% faster rates than those that have a single product. Add-ons is another really easy thing to do with an existing product or platform that you could go sort of mess around with tomorrow. We see this as like very commonly underthought about in the market. But companies that do this well have 18 to 54% higher lifetime value when they have at least one add-on. All right, this is one of my favorite topics, localization. So I work for Paddle. We're a global company headquartered in London. Most companies in Europe and abroad think about this from day one. US companies often do not think about this, and it's a big mistake. If you look at Asana's S1, 40% of their revenue growth was from international, and it grew at a faster rate than their US volume did. So this is often a thing that US companies just like ignore, because they're like, oh, the market's huge. But there's usually a big opportunity here that's not that hard to get. Easiest thing you can do is cosmetic localization. So if you have a checkout, for instance, or a sort of buy now page or talk to sales, change the language, change the currency you're showing on your pricing page to match markets you might want to penetrate. Super easy to do. Like there's widgets you can download tomorrow that do this for you automatically. We recommend going a lot deeper than that. And we see in the data that companies that do this well perform a lot better. So adding multiple currencies, companies that do that grow 12% faster. Those that have a lot of currencies, 25 plus, grow 25% faster. Payment methods, again, if you're just in the US, you're thinking credit card's fine, wire transfer ACH is fine. Around the world, there are a ton of different payment methods that are preferred. So for instance, in Germany, most people like to use PayPal to buy software. Kind of blew my mind when I learned that, but 60% of our transactions from Germany are done via PayPal. Something as simple as that can dramatically increase your growth rates. Another really interesting thing to think about is pricing power. So this, again, is a thing you can do tomorrow, especially if you have a sort of self-serve checkout. Companies in the Nordics and in Western Europe are willing to pay 20% higher prices for the exact same product relative to the US. So go increase your price by 20% in Western Europe and watch your conversion rates stay the same. In other parts of the world, they're not, right? Purchasing power is lower, et cetera. You can actually grow faster if you reduce your price in places like India and Brazil relative to US. So again, something pretty simple that you can look at tomorrow and improve growth rates. Tax is a really fun one that if you want to go deep on, we think a lot about it, grab me after. It's a sneaky one that a lot of folks aren't thinking about. And a fun fact we have is in Europe, the expectation, especially from a B2B transaction, is that you essentially exclude the tax, meaning you show them the amount of tax that you're applying to the transaction instead of just bearing it in your product, in your pricing, excuse me. So companies that are, quote, tax inclusive, meaning they're just adding tax to their price instead of showing it as a different line item, grow at 15% slower rates. So you have to pay tax. It's not an option. This has all changed dramatically in the last 7 years, by the way. So if you're not paying sales tax today, you really need to look at that because we had a company approach us a year ago who owed $5 million to the UK in back taxes, and they were not giving up on collecting that money. So it can be a sneaky one that can bite you if you're not careful. All right, I'm not going to dwell on this because we did a talk earlier here on this topic deeply. If you want to talk more about this, grab me. We recommend you change your prices once a quarter. I'm going to leave it at that. Because you're probably not thinking about this at all as a monetization tool. Change your price once a quarter. Second thing is have a pricing committee. So having a group of people come from products, sales, marketing, probably your CEO, who are responsible for price and look at it monthly. Easy thing to do to start to think about how to actually get into a rhythm of changing your price frequently. All right, everyone's favorite topic, churn. This is obviously getting worse right now. A couple of things you can do to stem the tide. There's two types of churn. There's voluntary churn. Someone says, I don't really like your product that much. I don't want to pay you anymore. Involuntary churn. I actually like your product and I want to keep using it, but for whatever weird reason, I'm not going to pay you. We're going to focus on that type of churn. Often it's like around 40% of total churn, and folks tend not to think about it. So one thing you can do is term length. This is fairly obvious. Ask for an annual deal instead of a monthly deal. I think a lot of folks know that. What's maybe a little more non-obvious is that you can do it after the customer has already signed up. So Whoop is one of our customers, and what they do after month one, and they look at usage data to inform this, is they'll send an offer to a user who's really happy, who's using a lot, and say, hey, by the way, you can get a big discount if you sign up for a year. Cancellation flows. So when someone is going to cancel your product, they're like on a freight train to, I hate this, I don't want to use it ever again, see you later, I'm mad for whatever reason. So you're probably not going to save a ton of them, but there's some subtle things that you can do to save some of them. And a lot of that is just basic human psychology. What we recommend folks do is add a little prompt that says, hey, like, understand you're wanting to cancel, why? Help me understand that better. Based on the answer, serving up a little bit of nostalgia. Why did you like us? Think about the best thing of being a customer of ours. What was that thing? Doing something as simple as that, as prompting them to think about the positive, we've seen can reduce churn by 10 to 25%. Again, not a huge lift. Simple thing you can do, taps into a little bit of psychology that can reduce churn. How many of you guys look at payment failure? Okay, everyone should raise their hand next time I ask this question. This is another sort of low-hanging fruit thing that a lot of folks don't think about, and it's typically the biggest bucket of involuntary churn. So a lot of things you can do to fix this, and again, it's really not that hard. The simplest thing you can do is use our product retain. Otherwise, just making sure you have some dunning flow in place to get ahead of credit card failures. So making sure you're understanding when a credit card's about to fail and prompting the customer ahead of that to change their payment information. And then having recovery after that, retries, SMS, email, prompting them to update their information to actually have that transaction go through. Again, that's often 50% or more of involuntary churn, which is usually about 40% of total churn. So simple payment recovery can increase your recovery by 20%. Okay, we're basically done. Let's turn it over to Q&A. Anything you guys want to dive deeper on that we talked about? I went very fast.
You mentioned the recovery, like you said that we can anticipate the failure and try to direct to an alternative route. How do you anticipate it?
The credit card, there's tools to help you do this. So I would just use a tool because it's going to be the easiest thing to do. But it's based on when the credit card expiration date is.
Oh, the expiration.
Mm-hmm. I'd be a billionaire if I knew the answer to that question.
Like 12, 18, 24 months?
Yeah, no idea. I think it's going to depend, obviously, like, things are very fluid. I think, are we in a recession or not? That's not up to me to define. I would argue based on our data, like, things are probably going to get worse before they get better. Unfortunately. And I don't have an answer as to when it's going to get better again.
Question for localization. Do you have an idea of how much
question we get all the time.
Yep.
And for our company, we're content-driven, these are the services we provide. So localization is, okay, step one, let's start just going through that process of converting over the current content we have. Then the real bitch is how do you maintain it then as new content and new things change over time.
Yeah.
When you look at that cost, you kind of weigh the pros and cons. It's hard because, like, we're primarily, U.S. focused, like parts of Western Europe, some now footprint in APAC, and this question literally pops up.
Constantly.
Right?
And are you thinking about like your content base? Are you thinking about localizing the content itself?
I mean, because I think being a content-driven platform,
Yeah.
I think that some of the suggestions you made about, okay, I put a meeting more effectively in the checkout process, 100% would probably have an uptick.
Yep.
The real request comes from the content itself, and this is where it becomes a really scary beast of like,
Rebuilding everything.
will change. And one of the initial costs is start going down that path.
Yeah.
And more importantly, what are the costs to maintain it as over time?
Yeah.
That's where it gets kind of scary.
Yeah. That's going to be a lot harder than some of the stuff I suggested, obviously. And I don't have a great answer for that depth. That's a little beyond what we've looked at. The buying experience is what we're normally thinking about, and that does matter. And we've seen rates vary as much as 10% up to 50% on a checkout. So yeah, it's wild, and it's a pretty low-hanging thing that you can go do. So if you do that in the inverse, you're probably losing out on 10% of revenue potentially. The payment failures we see is a big one. We look at this all the time with our customers, and we'll see folks missing out both on the initial attempted payment and then on subsequent attempted payments. Yeah, upwards of like 10% of their revenue, 15% of their revenue. And when you add all this stuff up, it can be super, super meaningful. Yeah. Anything else? Cool. Well, if any of this stuff is interesting, grab me. Happy to go deeper. Appreciate it.
Tripp Brockway